Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. So, it is early in the morning. It's 8:20 over here on the West Coast. And I know y'all probably like, where this girl been at? Because I kind of been on a little hiatus, right? Your girl been in prison. In prison all this long time. Yes, that's why you guys haven't been seeing any of my posts. Because I've been in prison. Let me stop playing with y'all. But I have been in prison. I actually work for the California Department of Corrections as a psychological intern or psychologist intern. Will be the official title. And yeah, I've been pretty busy. But I actually had some time yesterday to go check out this documentary, this long-awaited documentary by Tariq Nasheed called Hidden Colors. And this is part of a series. It's a 5-part series. And the 5th part actually was released in theaters. It debuted in theaters yesterday in Los Angeles. So being that it's an independently produced film, he actually has select theaters that he's showing the Hidden Colors 5 movie in. And LA, Los Angeles, was the very first city where it premiered, and I actually was at the screening of it last night at 7 p.m. at the Aria Fine Arts Center, I think it's called, or Araya, I don't know how to pronounce it, Araya, whatever. But it was in Beverly Hills, which I thought was pretty interesting how they would host a Hidden Colors screening. A documentary that highlights the racial oppression and the marginalization of African Americans. They will host a documentary like that in the middle of Beverly Hills. I thought that was pretty interesting. But anyway, I got there about 20 minutes prior to 7, which is actually a perfect time because maybe like 5 minutes after I got there, they let us in the theater. And it went pretty smooth. Like the check-in process was pretty smooth. Actually, had got tickets a whole month in advance. Well, I didn't purchase them, but a friend of mine did purchase the tickets like a month in advance. So I have been waiting for this movie, this documentary, to come out and to be able to see it, and not just see it, but of course see it on the big screen. It's like a totally different experience watching a movie on the big screen as opposed to watching it, at home, on a smaller screen. And so, where do I begin? I have a few things to say. I can't really talk that long because I'm actually at the prison now where I work. So I do have to get ready to go inside like in a half hour or maybe 20 minutes actually, because I still got to eat breakfast. But I have some things I do want to share. First of all, I have to say good job to Tariq Nasheed for raising consciousness within the African American community, or let's say the Black community, the Pan-African community, because this film isn't just for African Americans, but it's for all of the melanated people throughout the world. So kudos to you, Tariq Nasheed, for taking this responsibility and highlighting some very important issues that we as African Americans have been dealing with for many centuries. This isn't things that he highlighted in this documentary aren't necessarily new issues. It's things that we've been dealing with for eons of time. So I have much respect for, him as a filmmaker, because he could be making films on anything, but he chooses to make films specifically on issues that affect African Americans, and it's very serious. So I'll just have to start off this video by saying kudos to you, Tariq Nasheed, for that. Speaking of which, I actually sat like in the middle of the theater, maybe like 4 rows, I think, from the screen, 4 or 5 rows from the screen. And Tariq Nasheed actually was sitting like a couple rows directly behind me. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Like when I came in, I sat down and then maybe about 10 minutes after I sat down, I noticed that him and his entourage came in and they sat down. And of course, they had to make an entrance like we knew it was him when he came in. Because you can hear him, you know. And they were cracking jokes. He's a jokester. He's a very comical person, which I thought is a pretty. I think that is it's interesting. I think that's a pretty interesting dynamic to this film, you know, and the perspective, you know, in making this film coming from a person who publicly stated that he is not necessarily a leader. So he put it out there several times. I actually heard him say it recently in one of his radio podcasts on YouTube that he is not a leader. So he makes it pretty clear that he is not a conscious leader. He doesn't want to be identified as a conscious leader. In fact, he stated that there are no black leaders. There aren't any black leaders. And I was just like, okay, that's a pretty extreme statement to make. But he made that statement recently. I don't remember which video it was, which YouTube, because he goes live on YouTube. I don't remember which title it was, but I know it was recently, probably within the past week, that he actually had stated that, and I was just like, wow. And I don't really have time necessarily to watch all of his videos, you know, especially all the way through, because they can be pretty lengthy. But I did catch that part, and I was just like, okay. I think that there is some relief, I guess, in making that statement. You know, it takes kind of the real responsibility off his back to effect change, you know, for African Americans. Because think about it, like if you are held to a standard of being called a leader, that means that you have a responsibility. You know, there are expectations that you must meet. Dr. Umar Johnson, he has taken upon that call to be a leader of, you know, in effecting change for the African American community. And just look at all the backlash that he's received, you know, because he is not a perfect human being. You know, like they hold you to a really high pedestal, almost like you have to be God. So I can understand why Tariq Nasheed would say that he's not a leader. He doesn't want to be a leader. He doesn't want that title. So he is, you know, a filmmaker. He is in the entertainment industry. It's very clear that, you know, he has that angle, but also he has a passion for educating African Americans. So I like that, you know, and it's interesting to see, you know, the end product of this series, Hidden Colors 5, and how there's an intersection between the consciousness of African Americans and entertainment. So that's basically what you see in Hidden Colors 5. You know, there's an intersection between two different worlds, and it's just like it can be kind of tricky, I think, you know, when you bring those two worlds together, because, you know, we know that consciousness is a really important thing. You know, it shouldn't be taken lightly, right? And I'm just going to go ahead and say it like this. So in the film, you know, he has different sections, just like the structure of this film kind of takes the same pattern as the first four parts, Hidden Colors 1 through 4. And so, you know, it has different chapters, basically where he's highlighting, in this particular installment, Hidden Colors 5, he focuses on the different types of warfare that African Americans are experiencing, you know, that we are under, you know, from, you know, different perspectives. So he talks about psychological warfare, he talks about spiritual, religious warfare, you know, the health attacks that we are under. He talks about interpersonal relationships between black women and black men, which I actually like that part. And I also like the health part too, because I think that's really important. You know, how what we eat matters, and how, you know, there's a whole industry designed to basically keep us sick, you know, which, like I said, isn't really new information. So I have to put that out there that, you know, I may sound kind of critical in my review of Hidden Colors 5 is because I am, you know, especially as a creator myself. You know, I'm a writer, you know, so I look at things from a different eye, so to speak. So I have to say that really nothing was new information to me. And I think it wasn't really necessarily new information to most people who were there. By the way, that theater was packed. It was sold out. It was a full house, so kudos to Tariq Nasheed for making that happen. And also, I noticed that the film is being shown across the U.S., maybe like 26 different cities across the U.S. So I think that's pretty major. It's not in every theater, but being that it's going to over 24 cities across the U.S., I think that is pretty significant. But yeah, back to the film. It's like, it's not really new information because many black people have been conscious, from those of us who are so-called educated, formally educated, by the traditional American system, school educational system in terms of higher education, college or graduate school, to those of us who aren't traditionally educated, most black people living in this country, we know what's up. Like, we know what's going on. It's not new information to us. Like, we are exposed to a lot of different things through social media, Facebook, Instagram. There are a lot of memes that talk about the different, types of warfare, the oppression and the marginalization that we are under as African Americans. So it's not necessarily new what, the stuff that he covered in this film, the different angles that he came from. Like, we all know, we live it, like, we are in it, right? you know but I think, and I'm gonna talk about some things that I would have liked to see different in with this film, right? So, I felt like he kind of touched the surface on a lot of different areas. He talked about like religion and how, religion has been whitewashed, and we went from, a black Jesus to a white Jesus, and we shouldn't be worshiping a white Jesus. I think we all know that, right? He talked about, the health and, how there is an agenda to keep us sick. And, basically we all know that every industry in America is rooted in capitalism, even the healthcare industry, unfortunately, even the criminal justice system, like, it's all about making profit. And so when we're talking about the intent of any industry is to gain a profit, there's a compromise, right? So, the goal obviously with health is to enhance people's well-being, to make sure that we are living longer and living healthier and increasing the quality of life. But that isn't necessarily the case. So he talked about, the film highlighted, how like sugar and salt are kind of like drugs. And I don't want to give too much of the film away, but those are just some kind of things that were highlighted in the film. And I like that how he actually incorporated many different people in the documentary from different disciplines. So there was a doctor, in there, talking about like the natural health food aspect. There was a rapper, or I think a few rappers actually, David Banner and Ice-T. Ice-T, y'all. I'm just like, what is this? He said some good things, but one thing I didn't like how he kind of like glorified, his past life. It's good to be honest, right? About, okay, this is what I did, right? But I feel like sometimes we, as black people, we tend to glorify the things that we speak against now, like now that we're so-called conscious and we're more educated. It's like you want to talk bad about it, but in the same vein, it's like reminiscing on it and how, the good times and how, you sold drugs. And I'm just like, okay, is this even appropriate for this kind of film? But I guess it had its role, it had its place in the film. And so, yeah, we had David Banner, and I was surprised to see Brother Polite. And Brother Polite, he kind of spoke about the health aspect of the warfare that we are under. And he said something about, how are we going to go to war? How are we going to strap up our boots and go to war when most of us have swollen ankles? And it's just like, damn, that was a hit, because he's talking about high blood pressure and diabetes, which are two of the most common health conditions that affecting African Americans. So I like that he put that out there, because that is something to think about, and speaking of warfare, granted that this particular installment in the Hidden Colors series was kind of focused on the warfare that we are under, right? And I'm just like, I kind of like that energy. I kind of like, the movement, right? But we've kind of been under warfare for many years. And I saw something on Facebook the other day about, oh, if there was a race war. And I'm just like, dude, where y'all has been at? Like, if there was a race war, like, wake up, hello, we are already in a race war, So, I think, yeah, it's kind of refreshing to see, black people talk about these issues so openly, right? And it's almost as if to say, like, we're speaking about it unapologetically, like, hey, white America, we know what's up. We know what you guys are doing to us. But on the same token, I'm just like, is that enough? I just feel like it's something missing. It's not enough to just for us to talk about it. Now, granted, making documentaries like this serve a huge purpose because it keeps the conversation going, right? It keeps us woke, basically. And for those of us who are not woke, who are unaware of what's happening on many different levels, it wakes them up, right? It allows us to open our eyes. It allows, things that have been kind of pushed down in our subconscious minds to be brought out to our conscious minds, to be brought to our awareness, so that we are actively thinking about it, that we don't just dismiss it and repress it, and try to avoid it and not think about it, but that we bring it to our conscious awareness. And when things are in our conscious awareness, that it affects us emotionally, physically, behaviorally, so that not only are we thinking about it, but we feel some kind of way about it. We feel motivated to do something about it, and action comes as a result of that, right? And so one thing I did especially like about Hidden Colors 5 is at the end, which I think is pretty consistent with the other installments as well, is that he talks about the resistance of Black Americans. This is a huge point to make, because it's not enough to say, oh, woe is us, this is the things that we are under, white people are attacking us, there's a war basically that we're losing. That's not enough. But to talk about our strength, our resiliency, the things that we are doing to fight back, or things that we could do to fight back. I like that. And so I believe that is chapter 7 or part 7, in this particular installment of the series, Hidden Colors 5, where he talks about the resiliency of Black people, the resistance of Black people, and what we're doing and what we could do, right? And he pointed out a few things, which I'll mention here. When I say he, I'm just saying what he highlighted, what Tariq Nasheed highlighted, in the documentary. But of course, he had different people who spoke on these things in the documentary, and they were basically, one of them was saying how it would be good for us, and this is the financial part, because like I say, he talked about many different aspects of the warfare: psychological, spiritual, religious, health-wise, and of course financial is a really important piece. And we talk about this all the time, how we need to come together. We just come together and put our money together, and support Black businesses. There's a whole movement on this. There are a lot of Facebook groups on mobilizing change in the African American community through financial literacy, and actually spending money, pooling our resources together to invest in Black businesses, right? And so there was a point where they said, and I really like this. This is like a good idea, that there should be maybe once a week, once a month, but there should be marches to Black businesses, where we all just take $20 and just go support black businesses. Like a march, a serious march where we get like hundreds, if not, thousands of black people in the neighborhood and do that. And I'm just like, that sounds very empowering. That sounds very powerful. But I'm also, because I had to look at things from many different angles, right? So I'm analyzing, what's happening, in this documentary. And I'm just like, on one hand, that sounds good. But on the other hand, it seems like that's what we already do. We may not necessarily march, in droves to black-owned businesses, but we have events, There are cultural events where we bring black vendors together in one space, and we all just support them, and we buy black. We do it in person at these events, and we also do it online. So I'm like, it's not that we're not doing that, but I still feel like there's something missing, and I appreciate the effort. I appreciate, kind of touching the surface, because this isn't, I feel like the documentary, it just barely touches the surface. It gives us kind of like an abstract plan for bringing about change, but it's not really like concrete, detailed steps on what we should do. And also, I think what was missing was statistics, like hard numbers, data. It kind of like generally spoke like, oh, generally speaking, black people, we suffer from, diabetes, or high blood pressure, generally speaking, there's black on black crime, but it's not really like, we need to hear numbers. We need to see numbers. And not only that, another criticism that I have, of the documentary, because I'm a documentary person. Out of all of the different genres of movies there are out there, my favorite is documentaries. Like, I love I've been watching documentaries ever since I was a little girl. And I'm not new to this whole conscious movement. I think, in fact, I was initially exposed to, I guess, the political consciousness of what's happening in our society through Michael Moore and through Alex Jones. And some of you guys are probably familiar with those names. But Alex Jones, he had this whole thing about InfoWars. He was just letting us know everything. Illuminati, and people think that's not real. But there are secret societies out there that do exist. The chemtrails. Like, he talked about a lot of different things that we're not going to hear in mainstream media, and he got some criticism and backlash for it. That's how you know what he was saying was true, because they don't really want you to know what the real deal is. And also Michael Moore, he made a lot of documentaries too, like going into schools and different factories and companies, just giving us an inside look and what's really happening, because I think we get very caught up, in just day-to-day life, going to work, our families, watching and being entertained, by reality TV shows, or distracted by, Instagram, Facebook, that it slips past us, so we need to get like these wake-up calls, so to speak. And I can appreciate filmmakers, like Tariq Nasheed and Michael Moore, Alex Jones, like the likes of those, which I've had already been on those. I mean, talking about like over a decade ago, when I first like really became like woken up and to see what's happening in our society. And so, yeah, I think it's important that, I think it needs to be revisited. I don't know if Tariq Nasheed is going to do it, but I think somebody really needs to really take the time to look at numbers, show numbers, like hard statistics on what's happening for every different section that he covered, right? Whether it was spirituality, religion, health, street violence, within the African American community. I think that there needs to be more effort given to actually looking at real numbers. We need it. That's important information to know. And not only that, but from a filmmaker perspective, from a artistic, creative perspective, I think that it's important that I mean, I know it costs money. I get it. I know, that he produced this film by himself. He's an independent, filmmaker. So, of course, it costs money. But what I think I didn't kind of like was that he used stock images and stock videos. And so they weren't necessarily real. I mean, the content, what he was saying, the message is real, right? But this is what I noticed. And looking at the audience's response to what we saw visually on the screen, like some of those stock images basically, I think, trigger a comedic response, and I think it was more like a defense mechanism too, because some of the material, is really sensitive stuff that we're talking about here. But because he talked about cannibalism, how white people, they consume us, like literally and figuratively speaking. And he showed this image, of a white, I think it was a white woman, like eating like raw meat, and like the audience's response to that was that people laugh. Like they laugh, and not only at that, but like several different, like many different times throughout the documentary, like I heard laughs. I'm like, why are you guys laughing? I mean, I get it, like it's a very kind of difficult topic to confront, right? But even in its difficulty in looking at it and absorbing this information, the response should not be laughter, if anything, So I felt like, I don't know if it was the nature of the content or the imagery is what triggered people to laugh. Probably a mixture of both, but I think more so the imagery. And I'm just like, okay, I think it would have been more effective if he used like real life images and more real life videos. So he actually went in and we saw these things that he was talking about, like real stuff, not reenactments, or stock images or stock, but real stuff. That way we can connect better. And that reminds me, I'm looking at the time now, I'm very mindful that, I have to kind of wrap this up. But yeah, we need real stuff, things that, that is real. Like, okay, the images of Martin Luther King, that's real, right? That's a real figure in time that we can connect with. We can think back to, okay, the influence that Martin Luther King made in the black community, nationally, right? That's what I mean by real. Not some freaking stock image of some white woman that we don't even know. Like, we know is clearly fake, and I think that's what kind of triggered the comedic response. With that being said, I have to, give another kudos to Tariq Nasheed for the ending. I really like the ending, and I'm pretty sure you guys are going to see this movie will also like it as well, because yeah, he gave us a little treat. I'm not going to give it away, but I like that. And that's an example of what I mean by the realism. Like we needed more of that. That's something that we can connect with because it's real. It's something that actually happened. This is a real person, Like with the Michael Moore documentaries, and the Alex Jones videos, like they take us in there and we get to see like real things that are happening, in America. It's not a reenactment, it's not people acting. It's not, I think that's really important when it comes to conveying a very serious message. I have to say this. For example, like there was a part, I think it's towards the end, when we're talking about solutions and how they said that it's important that we have African-centered schools, right? And, of course, the first thing came to my mind was Dr. Umar Johnson. And I'm just like, yes, yes. But being that, of course, they had their beef a couple years ago, I'm just like, why? We need to be more serious. Why aren't we more serious? Like, that bothers me that we are not more serious about this. It's almost like our struggle, our oppression has become commercialized, with obviously the opportunity for people to make profit and financial gain from it, I feel like that seems like the real motive for a lot of things that are happening, with people in the conscious community saying that, okay, I'm giving this back. But it's just like, okay, what is your real intent, I get it. Yes, your passion for the Black community, your interest in these topics may drive you to create a documentary, but I feel like we need to have more like real energy given to, you know, these projects that we're working on, whether it's a documentary. You're like, we got to be serious about it, because it just seems like there isn't enough seriousness behind this movement. How can anybody take it seriously, you know, when we have the people that people look up to, right? You know, like Tariq Nasheed said he's not a leader, but he is. You know, when you have millions of people that follow you, you are a leader. You are a leader. Whether you want to be called that or not, you may not want that responsibility, but guess what? You created that. You create this situation where you have people who follow you, millions of people. So people are looking up to you, and it's like he's a humorous person, a comical person. So that was kind of like the tone in people's response to this movie, like throughout the movie, and even before it started, people were just laughing. Like, it's just like people went to go see like a comedy movie or a satire documentary. That's pretty much what it felt like, you know, in theater. It just, people didn't seem like they were serious. But there were moments where people were like, yeah, when they're talking about like interracial dating, right? Speaking against interracial marriage. And I was just like, okay, you know, it's good to see that. I mean, it seems like, I don't know if people doing it for a show or a front, where people are just like, yeah, interracial dating, but like in practice, what's happening. I feel like there's a disconnect between what we know and what we do. And we gotta really seriously put what we know into action, and that's why I have much respect for Dr. Umar Johnson. I will always, despite the attacks, and the criticism that he is under, because this is a man who not only has the knowledge and shares it with people, but he's actually being an example, being a real leader to demonstrate, okay, this is what we do with the knowledge. He's building a school. He's raised the funds. He's building a school. He's building a school, you guys, on the East Coast. And so I think that's really important, and that's kind of points to an example of one of the solutions that the documentary highlighted. Like, okay, we need more African-centered schools, and it would have been icing on the cake if he kind of made amends with Dr. Umar Johnson, went in there, went to the grounds of the FDMG Academy in Delaware, and we got some footage of that and him talking to, like, we need to see things in action. I cannot emphasize that enough. We need to get past the whole entertainment part, and to see that, okay, this is what's really happening. Go into black businesses and show black people in charge, and black people who actually own their own. We need to see this and hear stories about how they started the business from ground up. But I wish I could talk more. I really don't have time. I have to go to work, you guys. But thank you guys for watching. Feel free to share your comments below. I think that Hidden Colors series is very powerful. I encourage anybody, if you have not seen it, go into the website and purchase. I believe it's called hiddencolorsfilm.com is a website where you guys can go and purchase the entire box set. I think 1 through 5, and I think it's only like $90. It's a very nominal fee. So go get that if you're not able to see it in theaters. And I'll catch you guys later. Show your comments below. Love you guys. Bye.